Elisabeth of Austria was born on July 5, 1554 in Vienna. She was the daughter of Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian II and Maria of Austria, Infanta of Spain, and was a member of the Austrian branch of the House of Habsburg. As a child, Elisabeth lived a happy childhood together with her older sister Anna and brother Matthias in a pavilion in the garden of the Stallburg in Vienna. Her father, Maximilian II, often visited them, and it is said that Elisabeth was his favorite. The princess was considered among the most beautiful in Europe, but her intelligence, modesty, gentleness and goodness of heart were also praised, as well as her religious piety. Due to all these qualities, it was expected that a good marriage would be arranged for her. Elisabeth's mother, Maria, took personal charge of Elisabeth's religious education. Unlike the Infantes of Spain of the House of Habsburg, Elisabeth thus did not spend her childhood and youth in isolation, but in the environment of the court. In 1562, Marshal de Vieilleville, who had come to Vienna as a member of an embassy for the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand I, was impressed by the princess, who was then only 8 years old, and believed that she had all the necessary qualities to become the new Queen of France. Although Vieilleville was not authorized to make an actual offer, it appears that Elisabeth's grandfather Ferdinand was interested in the match. There was an exchange of gifts between the two courts, but at this time negotiations did not continue further. Several unsuccessful marriage attempts were first initiated by the Austrian crown to marry Elisabeth to Frederick II of Denmark or Sebastian I of Portugal, but in both cases the negotiations failed. The offer of a union with the King of France was only seriously considered from 1569 onwards. Due to the ongoing wars of religion in France, the country needed a Catholic marriage that would strengthen its Catholicity and cement its alliance with the Holy Roman Empire. Catherine de Medici, who was the mother of Charles IX, wanted her son to marry Elisabeth's older sister Anne, but when Anne was betrothed to her uncle Philip II of Spain, it was decided that the 16-year-old Elisabeth would have to marry the 20-year-old Charles IX of France. Papal dispensation for the marriage was granted on November 6, 1569, and the by-proxy marriage was held on October 22, 1570 in the Cathedral of Speyer in Germany. On November 4 of that same year, Elisabeth left the Holy Roman Empire. Once she arrived on French territory, her journey was delayed by severe rainfall, which made the roads impassable. Eventually, on November 24, she arrived at Sedan, which was located about 20 kilometers from Mézières, where the French court had settled. Curious to see his future wife, the king rode to Sedan dressed as a soldier to observe his bride as she walked with his brother Henri. He returned to Mézières very satisfied with her appearance. Charles IX and Elisabeth were officially married on November 26, 1570. Elisabeth was dressed in a silver cloth dress studded with pearls and a large purple mantle with golden fleurs-de-lis. She wore an imperial crown decorated with large diamonds, rubies and emeralds. The marriage festivities lasted for several days. On March 25, 1571, she was crowned Queen of France at the Basilique of Saint-Denis. Although there was never any real love between the couple, both spouses got along well. Charles IX realized that the numerous scandals of the French court might shock his bride and, together with his mother, did his utmost to involve her as little as possible. Elisabeth herself attended the Eucharist twice a day and was exasperated by the French courtiers' lack of respect towards religion. She openly showed her distaste for Protestant ideas, systematically refusing to allow courtiers and politicians with Protestant sympathies to kiss her hand during greetings. Furthermore, the queen was very reserved and, like most members of the House of Habsburg, she spoke German, Spanish, Latin and Italian, but not French. Thus, she could only communicate through one of her ladies who served as a translator. Elisabeth had virtually no influence at the French court, as Catherine de' Medici showed hardly any interest in her daughter-in-law, forcing her to accept the presence of Marie Touchet, who had already been the king's mistress before the marriage. Nevertheless, the king always treated Elisabeth with respect and tenderness. Soon she even became pregnant and retreated to the rural tranquility of Fontainebleau, far from the restless atmosphere of Paris. It was there, in August 1572, that she learned the terrible news of Bartholomew's Night. Despite her open dislike of Protestantism, she disapproved of the massacre and she refused to believe in the involvement of her husband and her mother-in-law. A short time later, her only child was born, a baby daughter named Marie-Elisabeth. Marie-Elisabeth was deeply loved by her parents, despite their inevitable disappointment that she was not the male heir for which they had hoped. Deeply marked by the tragedy of St. Bartholomew's Night, Charles IX saw his health deteriorate. When Charles IX fell fatally ill and died in 1574, Elisabeth, at her mother-in-law's request, was not present at his deathbed. The grieving widow decided not to accept the proposal to remarry Henry III, her late husband's brother and successor to the throne of France, but instead she chose to leave the court. Elisabeth had to leave her daughter behind, as Marie-Elisabeth was a daughter of France. Mother and daughter never saw each other again because Marie-Elisabeth, who was of frail health, died on April 2, 1578, at the young age of 5 years old. The child was deeply mourned by the court, and 8 days later, on April 10th, she was buried in a vault of the Basilica of Saint-Denis next to her father. Elisabeth left Paris for Vienna at the beginning of December 1575. Upon her departure, she was not even deemed worthy of a royal escort. Back in Vienna, Elisabeth led a life devoted to prayer and charity. When Philip II of Spain became a widower after the death of Elizabeth's sister Anne, Philip asked for Elizabeth's hand, but she politely refused, saying she did not want to be unfaithful to her late husband. Of her income, she used only 1/3 for herself. 1/3 went to all kinds of churches and monasteries, and another third was spent to help the poor. When her sister-in-law, Margaret of Valois, had fallen into disgrace, Elisabeth gave Margaret half of her fortune out of pity. In 1581, she founded the convent of Claresse in Vienna, where she withdrew and, without entering the convent herself, lived the strict life of a nun until her death. Elisabeth of Austria died on January 22, 1592. When her mother learned of her death, she is said to have exclaimed, "The best of us has died." According to her wishes, Elisabeth was buried in the church of her convent. When the convent was closed in 1782, Elisabeth's remains were transferred to the crypt beneath St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna, where she rests today. Thank you for watching.